It's Schrodinger's ceasefire. This week, the president announced that the ceasefire with Iran is over.
I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
When asked what changed since the president was praising the Iranians, his answer was very simple.
Last month, you said Iranian leaders were very rational people, nice people to deal with, strong people, smart people. Today, you said they were scum, sick people, and being led by sick people. What changed, and do you think...
I got to know.
Notice Secretary of State Marco Rubio chuckling in the background there. He was never a fan of the MOU, which was negotiated by the appeaser-in-chief, Vice President J.D. Vance. So what's next when it comes to reining in Iran's nuclear ambitions? Here to discuss, I'm so honored to have John Bolton, former Trump National Security Advisor and former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So to me, it seemed like this MOU was always destined to fail for the simple reason that it revealed the Iranians have no intention of ever again allowing free trade to go through the Strait of Hormuz. It seems like they moved the theater of war from the military side, which they cannot win, to the economic side, which they cannot lose because of their willingness to absorb economic pain much higher than ours. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's still hard to understand why we weren't better prepared for the potential that the Iranians would try to close the Strait of Hormuz. This is something as an international choke point obvious to anybody who can read a map. There have been plenty of planning for this in prior administrations. And I think we still have the capability to open the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, I think the preferred outcome here is not to accept this continuing uncertainty, but to restore the blockade against the export of Iranian oil, but to use force if necessary to open the Gulf for Gulf Arab oil to come out, which would continue to help bring the global price of oil down and hopefully the price of gasoline to American consumers. We cannot leave this situation such that the regime in Tehran thinks that it can open and close the Strait of Hormuz like turning a light switch on and off. That's just unacceptable.
The problem here, it strikes me, is that on the one hand, in order to actually create some sort of stable situation with Iran, some sort of a regime change that lasts and that means the end of their nuclear ambitions, you would either have to have boots on the ground, which the American people are completely against, including on the right, or you would have to have some situation where you're arming the Kurds, perhaps, with the help of Israel. There was reporting that the president nixed that plan at the behest of Erdogan, of Turkey. I mean, where do you see a third option here to actually rein in Iran's nuclear ambitions, given that this is the situation?
Well, I don't think there's any option other than regime change in Tehran that will guarantee that a subsequent government doesn't pursue nuclear weapons. For 47 years now, the regime, ever since the revolution, has been determined to get nuclear weapons. There's no evidence whatever they've ever made a strategic decision to abandon that course of action. So I think regime change is critical, and I think it's critical not just to end the nuclear threat, but to end Iran's status as the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Shia militia in Iraq, and really terrorism around the world. I also think ultimately you don't get regime change unless the people of Iran are willing to take some risks themselves. This regime is extraordinarily unpopular. The economy in Iran is devastated. The young people don't like it. The women have turned against it because of the murder of Mahsa Amini and the consequences of that. The ethnic groups are upset, but the opposition needs help. And if, as you say, there's a constraint on President Trump on using American boots on the ground, then the opposition has to take a role. What we have not done to this point is really gone to all the various and somewhat disorganized opposition forces in the country and said, what do you need? What resources do you need? You need money, you need communications, you need weapons. How can we help? I think there was an effort to get the Kurds better armed and to distribute weapons among other opposition figures inside Iran before the war started. My information is that President Erdogan of Turkey, no friend of ours in my view, called Trump and said, don't arm the Kurds because of Erdogan's own feud with the Kurds inside Turkey. I think it was a mistake to stop. I think the Kurds are true friends of the United States, and they're true enemies of the regime in Iran.
Part of the reason there's so little appetite among the American people for a kind of regime change is because of what are seen as failed regime change wars in Iraq, for example, which you supported. Do you have any regrets about that, about how it played out, especially given the situation now, looking back in hindsight?
Well, I think you have to look at each individual country in turn. We've had a lot of successful regime change operations in Grenada and Panama. I could go down a long list. I think we did succeed in Afghanistan. Our mistake there was withdrawing in the summer of 2021. We were in a position to stop terrorist attacks on the United States while we were there. We're not in that position now. And in Iraq, I think we were very successful in the gaining the critical objective of getting Saddam Hussein out of power. Our mistake was not in overthrowing Saddam. It was in not turning responsibility for the country back over to the Iraqi people themselves more quickly. And I think as you look at each situation, clearly there are lessons to be learned. And one lesson that applies directly to Iran is to give the opponents of the regime in Iran itself, the people who will benefit directly from getting rid of these oppressors, and make sure they're deeply involved in the effort.
How confident are you that the president can land this plane and actually deal a blow to the IRGC that would result in Iran never becoming a nuclear power?
Well, I think he's put himself in a trap of his own making, because the Iranians sense that he is hostage to our upcoming November elections. Again, the critical reason for the memorandum of understanding was to get prices at the pump of gasoline down. And the regime in Tehran, I think, senses that Trump's very reluctant to have significant new hostilities before then. So we're in a bad place, a difficult place for 4 months. But after the election, there's still time to do this. If we're not going to act more robustly before November, let's use this time to work with the opposition inside Iran, with the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Azeris, the opponents of the regime across the board. And maybe by then we'll be in a better position. The regime in Iran is not solid today. It's riven by many complex disagreements, reflecting the amount of devastation we did to its leadership. And I think there's still more we can do there.
Ambassador Bolton, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.